Hi, I'm Jeff Waldron here for another episode of the Training Impact Podcast. It's fun. Sometimes I stumbled on it must be Monday. I stumbled over the name of my own podcast. Anyway, we're here with Patrick Sanchez. Patrick is with Franchise Fastlane, a franchise sales organization. They help franchises grow their network. He's got a lot of great insights on what makes for a great franchisor and what a franchisee should look in it. And then from that, you can extrapolate, what a franchisor should be doing to train their franchisees for success. So I'd like to introduce today's guest, Patrick Sanchez. Patrick is the Vice President of Branded Partnerships with Franchise Fastlane. He's been there for 6 years. He's been in the franchise space for over 10 years. Patrick, welcome to the podcast. We're having a lot of fun. Why don't you tell us all? I'm always interested in how you ended up where you're at. So tell us a little bit about how'd you end up as a VP of Branded Partnerships at Franchise Fastlane? And what does Franchise Fastlane do?
Yeah, without a doubt. And thanks for having me on here as well. And apologies in advance because my brain's still turning on this Monday too. But just like many individuals in the franchise industry, I'm going to say the cliche, and I know everyone's going to cringe a little bit, but I fell into franchising without a doubt. Before I jump into it though, Franchise Fastlane, we are an FSO, a franchise sales organization. So we focus on working with franchisors, identifying the right partners, taking them through a pretty extensive list before partnering with them, to be able to help them identify the correct franchise partners that they need to help grow their system, making sure that those partners are contributing, they're helping innovate, and then of course they're doing great from a financial performance standpoint. But we're a bit unique. We're a top producer within the industry, but we also have a one-of-one program, which is more of a coaching or done with you style model. So we have a program that meets emerging franchisors where they're at, but then we also have a program that's that full service FSO for those ones that are really trying to grow fast. So,
right.
Yeah, as far as my background goes, grew up in Kansas. Like I said, kind of fell into this. I was working construction. So I grew up, framing houses, pouring concrete, things like that. And I was going into a small little nutrition store to get my protein and my multivitamins. And the owner there, Brent Kramer, fantastic individual. He invested a lot of time into me and he said, hey, instead of breaking your body, why don't you come over here and work for me full time? And so I did that. Just one location. And again, he did a lot. He encouraged me to continue going to school, really taught me how to really own my responsibilities. And we went from one location to 5 across the course of about 2 or 3 years. And then he was acquired by another gentleman named Eric. And Eric was just a force, man. He came in and went from 5 locations to 170.
Oh, my.
For several of those locations, I'd fly out there or drive out there. I'd spend 6-7 months, hire, fire, kind of get it stood up for the acquisitions and for the new builds. And I ended up having about 12 stores underneath my responsibility, going from Gillette, Wyoming, all the way over to the West Coast and Oregon and Nevada and California. And after doing that for several years, I loved to travel, as a young guy, but didn't really get any roots anywhere. And I realized, man, doing a lot for Eric, so I should do it for myself. So went and opened my own location, ran that for several years, exited that business, met my fantastic wife. I did a couple things for passion on the side, and I was approached by many fast laners, and they said, hey, come on over here. You're going to enjoy it. We're a great team. And so as you mentioned, I've been here for coming up on 6 years now. I was a director, so I did the sales for several concepts, including automotive, food, home service. I also did some youth enrichment. And then I was a VP of development. So I handled my directors and their respective brands. And then I was able to graduate into being the VP of brand partnerships. So getting to speak with franchisors on a daily basis to just identify, hey, where can we help as it relates to you acquiring new franchisees? And that's kind of it.
Did you sell the location? You said you opened up a location. So I guess you were a franchisee or a one unit franchisee?
Yeah, I was a franchisee. I took over an existing location up in Northern California. Whenever I wrapped that up, I ended up just closing it. I got myself into a pretty good position to where the SBA loan and all that was acquired, I was flush on it. And so I was really looking at, do I want to stay here? Do I want to continue what I'm doing? Do I want to renew the agreement?
Right.
Or I want to move on and do something else? And at that time, it was hey, I checked a box, so let's see what we can do and what's next.
So what do you enjoy the most about what you're doing? Because you've got a real positive energy, man. Which I love. It's great. It's awesome. So what from VP of Brand Partnerships, what does that mean, and what do you like about it?
Yeah. So as far as brand partnerships goes, I mean, it's really being able to identify the culture, the mission and vision within these franchisors we meet with, and just really see, like, are we able to get married? Do I see that same mission, vision, core
Hmm.
values that we have over here at the Fastlane demonstrated within their system? So that way we have confidence that as we bring new franchisees into their system, that they're going to change their lives. They're going to be able to take a B player or a C player, turn him to an A plus operator and start to
Hmm.
impact their community. And I think that that's really what I enjoy the most about it, is just being able to touch or have a slight impact on being able to then influence a franchisor as they start to change other people's lives as well. I mean, transparently, love construction, still do it on an ongoing basis. But that's
Uh-huh.
probably all I would have ever done if I wasn't given that opportunity of franchising. So I just like being able to be a small piece of seeing that influence happen with other people as well.
Well, it's one of the cool things about the industry is that, business ownership. I've owned a business now for over 20 years, and it's like home ownership, right? It's like home ownership just changes how you look at the world, and business ownership just changes how you look at the economy and everything. And the beautiful thing about the whole franchise industry is giving people an opportunity to be part of that set of business owners, and it just
Mhm.
tremendously. So it's really cool. So when you start looking at that, when you look at franchisors to represent and marrying them with the franchisees, like what makes a good franchisor? Because there are great franchisors and they're the average run of the mill guys, and they're these guys don't have that really have their stuff together, and especially when you get down to the emerging and developing, you got a lot of really great people there. But,
Mhm.
a lot of times they haven't necessarily systematized everything that makes it easy to communicate to another person, right? So what makes for a good franchisor to represent, and therefore a good franchise for somebody to buy into?
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole of a question. That
Oh, we got some time. We got some time.
uh, I think the first
Just softballs, nothing but
yeah,
softballs.
I think the first thing that's more important, or most important, I should say, is a founder fit. You're a crazy person if you're a founder. I mean, being able to be both the innovator as well as the executor, identify that solution that needs to be in place and create it out of thin air, but then also put it into a digestible manager for somebody that doesn't have any exposure or experience within your industry. I mean, the first thing I always look at is the founder. Are you a gritty individual? Do you have a passion and a care for being able to really influence that franchisee? And when things get bleak and dark and tough, because we all know that that happens consistently in business ownership, are you going to be able to wade the waters with that franchisee and help them come out on top on the other side of that? I mean, I could go on and on about the qualities and the characteristics that I would look for within a founder, but I think it boils down to three fundamentals as far as the actual business is
Uh-huh.
concerned for the franchisor. How do you identify your clients? Once the client is identified, then how do you actually sell that individual on your service? And then the last piece is fulfillment. For the franchisee or for you as the franchisor, what does the hiring process look for like for the employees? What does the consistent education or innovation look like? So that way you can consistently improve. I think it really just boils down to those things: acquisition, selling, and then servicing.
So in terms of now, when you say it boils down to those two things, so let's say I'm one of those crazy founders, and I've got this great idea and I produced it, and I've got let's put me in the emerging category, and I've got a couple of company owned stores, maybe I got a few franchises that through sheer force of my personality, because a lot of those guys are very, they just have, you just get caught up, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'm able to do all that, but what's how do you how does when you're looking at these emerging or developing, going from, well, here's this great, okay, you got the founder, he's passionate or she's passionate. How does that translate into that last part that you said is like being able to convey that system to an equally passionate person that's putting their own money on the line, right?
Mhm.
But may not have know how to identify prospects, close prospects, and then all the operational aspects about fulfillment. Because in most large businesses, those are three different jobs:
Mhm. Yep. You're 100% correct.
VP of marketing, VP of sales, and chief operating officer.
Yeah, we can definitely slow that down a little bit. And I'm a little bit annoying. Like, if anybody that looks at any of the content that I put out that's listening to this, I always talk about systems, systems, systems. I mean, I'm really repetitive about it. And so with identifying clients, for example, when I'm working with a prospective franchisee, very
Hmm.
rarely are they checking each one of those boxes as far as, yeah, they have sales experience. They cold called, they had to do hard sales, or they had to nurture an individual. They don't always have sales and operations or sales and marketing and operations. It's usually they're really, really good at one area. And then
Right.
it's the franchisor's responsibility to have that process in place to really fill in those blanks for the franchisee. So with identifying clients, I think that that's probably one of the biggest areas, call it marketing, that the
Hmm.
majority of franchisors that are emerging really need to dial in. Because
Hmm.
most Zors, they made it successful in their backyard, and they're assuming, okay, if I did it in Boise, Idaho, then that means it's going to work in Houston, Texas. And that's not
Right.
the case. Different socioeconomics, demographics, so on and so forth. So most franchisors, maybe they started the interest within their backyard because there's a natural need, or they're really good at guerrilla marketing. They're the mayor, the town personality, they're building relationships. Franchisees that they work with aren't always going to be like that. So do you have a in-house marketing team or solution, or third-party marketing team and solution for that franchisee to begin to allocate spend, monitor the return, and know on a mathematical basis, if I do X amount of spend with X amount of attention, I'm going to have X amount of at bats for me to be able to actually influence this market and get this location off the ground.
So would you say most of the franchisees are more on the operational side, or and therefore not so much on the definitely not on the marketing, and then can use some help on the sales side?
Yeah, I think it depends on the category, but me
Right.
personally, with all the
Yeah.
placements that I've done, the majority of the time, the candidates really err towards the marketing acumen a little bit, or at least
Hmm.
understanding of it, and operations. And the majority of folks that I connect with that have a good amount of sales experience, they've been able to catapult their careers and make themselves very valuable to a lot of companies. Usually, when I have a sales minded individual approach us as a franchisee, it's because they're in a position to where, man, I've been doing this kind of like me, been doing
Yeah.
this a
Yeah.
lot for
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody else. It's time to do it for myself.
Well, hey, just shifting gears. Do you miss running the show on your own, or?
I do. I was thinking about that before we hopped on together. I definitely do. My wife and I, she's fantastic. She's very operationally minded. She's a really good implementer and integrator. But we bounced around quite a bit. Boise's the longest place we've lived anywhere for a long time now, and we're
Hmm.
starting to get that itch again. So it's kind of tough to commit to a 10-year agreement when I know we're probably going to pick up and move in a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, as a business owner, yes, it's that was actually. It's funny you say that because my wife and I had moved out here to Ann Arbor back in the early 2000s, and yeah, that's part of this internet startup thing that was going to be the next Microsoft, and nobody's heard of them because they didn't become the next Microsoft. Google did. And anyway, when things were, yeah, I was given the opportunity to spin off the office, and it was that exact conversation we had was, well, we're from New York area, or New York, and it was like, we're going to come out here to Ann Arbor, boatload of stock options, 4 years, cash out, have our, drop dead money,
Hmm.
and go home. And 2 years in, it was heading south pretty. But I was given the opportunity to spin off the office and do a management buyout. It was the same thing you just said was,
Hmm.
well, if we do this, we're not heading home in 2 years.
That's right.
We're in Ann Arbor, and here we are 20, I am 25 years later. So, you definitely have to have that commitment, you know.
Hmm.
So I'm sorry, just shifting back to where we were. Um, so you got that, that's on the franchise order. You talked about like founder fit, and do they have that vision? Have they, systematize things? Well, if you were a franchisee, how would you know that those things are systematized? Like I think I understand what you mean, but I'm a lifelong consultant and built processes and systems for large companies, and you know, like, so I have a very distinct understanding of what that means. But I'm just thinking the uninitiated, like, how would they know that there's a system there for marketing? And I like the way you said it. There's, identifying the people you want to sell to, selling to them, and then fulfilling. And man, if you can do those three, I mean, that's this secret of every freaking business I've ever been involved in.
Hmm.
And my secret sauce has always been, and do a great job fulfilling, and then they'll invite you back and
That's
they'll buy
right.
more from you. It's a really sophisticated, strategy. do a good job and they'll ask you to do more. But if have never been a business owner or even run a department or or something, you know, uh, how would you know that, because everybody's going to say, nobody goes, I have a crappy system
Right.
for marketing,
Everyone has the best
and,
thing.
and you got to figure out how to just, fulfill it on your own. Everybody comes down and says, our stuff is buttoned down, rock solid, airtight. You can't miss. You give us $1, you'll make $1 million. Everybody says that, but as a franchisee, you've got to be able to still then go, well, what makes for a good systematic marketing, sales, and fulfillment? Like how would I know that as not somebody who's never run a business and maybe never done marketing, right? Or I've never
Mhm.
done operations. Like how would I know?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I'll keep to my rules of 3 here. So, the first one I would say is just using your resources. There's industry experts, right? If you are trying to get better at a particular area or understand it, then you should lean on a coach or a piece of influence that can help you identify those things. So that's why FSOs are really important, the ones that are doing a good job vetting and identifying the brands that are ready to grow. So you have that extra layer of security and leveraging also like a franchise consultant within the space that can really unpack for a prospective franchisee where are the areas that they're falling short based off of what they're looking for and what Zors do I know that are going to be able to help, fill those blanks. So that'd be the first thing, just really leveraging individuals within the space. But
Mhm.
as it relates specifically to, I'd say, qualifying if a brand checks those appropriate boxes, it would be historical operation history, especially for emerging Zors, seeing if they have a few different corporate locations that are manager ran that are in different regions. Where a franchisor can really kind of work themselves into a corner is they are wearing all the hats. They've got 1 or 2 locations, which is great, but they're maybe within 15, 20 minutes of each other. They're driving
Mhm.
to them every single day, and they really, truly haven't created the systems that can then delegate those responsibilities, which means it's probably not duplicatable across various parts of the nation. So historical operation history, what locations are they in, et cetera, which can mean in theory, okay, they've got those systems in place. But the third one I'd mention and the absolute most important is just research as it relates to franchisee validation, picking up the phone, calling those franchisees, understanding the good, bad, and ugly within the business model, because again, it gets tough, and
Right.
really validate what they're hearing from the brand on, hey, Mr. Mrs. Franchisor said that they've got the perfect call setting, closing, appointment setter, whatever you need for your acquisition. Have you actually experienced that? And seeing it played out firsthand from somebody that took the leap and made the decision themselves.
So getting that endorsement from other franchisees,
Yep. Correct.
and leaning on. So if I hear you correctly, there's a number of folks in the industry that you can lean on,
Hmm.
and you may or may not have any relationship with them to begin with, so that how much you could. There's always the thing of trust, right? And if you're if you're new to the whole thing, it's not that you don't trust folks, but it's not like my uncle said it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you start building that, you lean on some folks in the industry, and then you can start, if you get multiple inputs, you'll start to see a pattern emerge. Is that a good way of thinking of it?
Yeah, without a doubt. Because I don't think that with proving or identifying that a franchisor or a business has all the systems in place is just, one, magic piece that's going to really make everything fit for you. It is a combination of those 3 things. So
Right.
leveraging your resources and really making sure you're getting feedback from others that have already been down that.
Very cool. And so when Franchise Fastlane looks at representing somebody, is it those types of things you're looking for, and then you're trying to do a good match, or help me understand a little bit more about the role an FSO plays,
Yeah.
and how, because it's a matchmaker thing, right? But you've got a portfolio of firms you're representing, right? How does that help me understand, because I'm new to this.
Yeah, yeah, I'll water it down big time. I mean, ultimately, we've got a vetting process that has dozens and dozens of boxes that have to be checked. And it's not just me making the decision over here as well. We've got a huge team as it relates to our CO or CDO or founder or co-founder that whenever there's a prospective brand that we're thinking, man, this might be a really good fast lane fit, we're making sure that it's a democratic kind of conversation to where we make sure that it is just that an ideal fit. But the why behind a franchisor wanting to work with us is it does take a lot of time to find that needle in the haystack of a good operator. I
Hmm.
think the average industry closing percentage for just organic interest within a
Right.
brand is about 0.5%. So that means
Okay.
one out of every 200 people that's interested in a business model actually have the applicable business acumen, the liquidity, the ability to be successful within that model. And so that's a lot of work, especially if you're, really focusing on making sure your franchisees are successful within your systems. Adding
Right.
that layer of identifying prospective franchisees is just a whole different ballgame. So we really step in so that way, no, we're not cooks, cleaners, and dishwashers. The franchisor is focusing on getting the franchisees open, operational, and scaling. And we are hyper focused on identifying that proper buying avatar that they're looking for and educating them throughout the opportunity.
And how do you find those folks? How do you identify those potential franchisees?
Yeah, yeah,
Not to give away any, magic sauce secrets,
no,
but
no, it's a good question. And I'm gonna tie it all the way back to the very beginning. It's having a very, very fluid marketing system in place. So where we really have a good amount of expertise is we have relationships with those industry experts, with
uh-huh.
those consultants within the world, with those coaches that they say, man, here's this really good person. He's ready to move forward or ready to identify the next opportunity. So they have that relationship. But then the other is just within making sure that we're properly positioning the brand opportunity in a digestible fashion to where somebody that is looking into going into business ownership for themselves, they can look at a business model after meeting with one of our directors or vice presidents, and we can really break it down for them in a simple and easy to understand way. So then they can begin to do those key pieces of validation, et cetera, that we mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the 1 in 200, the 0.5% conversion, and
Mhm.
that's getting them in the door. Is there any data or fit on how relative success rates? Right, like I could see the getting them in, but ostensibly, if you had a better fit, like I think the lesson I'm taking away from this conversation is it's all about fit, right?
Mhm.
And and making sure that you as a franchisee fit with the franchisor on a bunch of dimensions, and then you're seeking a bunch of different data points, to confirm to see is it a good fit, and that's not just systems, that's also personality, that's also culture of the organization, and it doesn't say that one culture is better or worse than the other, but what it does mean is like if if it's not your type of environment, if it's a chill environment and you're a go, go, go person, it's going to be frustrating. If
Mhm.
it's a go, go, go environment and you're a chill type of person, it's going to be stressful. And you're looking for that kind of fit thing. So, but is there any, because I got to believe what you're, to your point, it's that, it's that specialization of an
Mhm.
FSO, right? You're specializing in identify and closing individuals and looking for that fit. Is there any data on the success of franchisees if they came into the system directly versus through an FSO or anything like that?
Yeah,
Just curious.
that's a fantastic question. I'm not sure. I know that there's a pretty well-known company in the industry called Fran Data, and they spend a
Uh-huh.
lot of time really diving into that and identifying what does a success rate look like within a particular model. I believe so, at least. So hopefully, I'm not speaking out of turn. But I think I'm being speculative here without having any kind of hard data in front of me. But
Yeah.
the FSOs, the franchisors, regardless of where the we'll call it candidate opportunity is coming from,
Yeah.
as long as they really peg the proper brand positioning and be very transparent and clear, no surprises about the
Right.
amount of effort it takes to operate within that system. And they are, to your point, meeting them in person for that confirmation day or
Right.
meet the team day. And they're making sure that there's as much data as possible for the candidate to really absorb and understand. I mean, that's where you try and have the best success rate as possible on
Yeah.
the outcome. I do think some emerging franchisors, they get a little trigger happy. They
Mhm.
think, "Man, I built this model, it's successful, so I'm gonna award this business to anybody with a pulse." And that's where they can really get themselves in trouble. one thing that I'm a big proponent of is culture's not, just established from day one. It's not this intuitive, natural thing that occurs.
Hmm.
It's something that you have to make and you have to spend a lot of time making. So kind of to your point, and I think what you're getting at is you really do have this percentage of, making sure that the boxes are checked, the education is there, but it boils down to also that gut feeling of meeting someone in person, looking at them in the eyes, shaking their hand and making sure they don't have horns in the tail, and you're gonna have a happy marriage.
And it is a marriage.
It is marriage. Yeah.
It's I always think of I look at sales as I'm always in it for the long haul,
Mhm.
and so it's always a marriage. And the only thing different is we get to have multiple partners. You get married multiple times,
Mhm.
but it is that process. So it's very interesting. So this is the Training Impact Podcast. I got the name right that time, so good for me. So, have you seen from a from a training program perspective that the franchisors are putting out? Do they make a difference in these evaluations? Do they help people be more successful? Type of training? What do you generally see as a from an emerging, developing, and established franchisor in terms of what would a typical training program be like?
Yeah, I mean, all these rabbit hole questions that we could just keep going in the weeds on. This is great. I wish I could have more of our team on the call
I'm a
too.
very curious guy, so I just I'm trying to sit there. What could I learn from Patrick today?
No. I man, again, so many different directions that we can take it, and I'm just going to piece together some of the more, I'd say, important things that need to exist within a franchisor's model. But when we look at initial training, one thing that still catches me off guard, I still meet business owners sometimes that they don't have like a really well established CRM. And they're
Hmm.
still kind of tabulating things on Excel or something that they put together, like a combination of hard ways of tracking data. But I think what is most important first is an LMS. So what kind of system is in place, a learning management system where a franchisee can self-guide through the educational process of the critical components of that business model.
Hmm.
So when we talk about the individual's been acquired, now the individual needs to be sold or see the opportunity of the solution that they're looking for. Making sure that in the LMS you've got recordings, best practices, pitches, materials that can be printed off and used for training the employees. So making sure there's a centralized location that has a lot of
Hmm.
that data just from a base level, and then everything else can be kind of filled in by the franchisor. So that's the most important one for me day one.
And that's it allows for the self study.
Hmm.
Like a lot of models I see, especially on the emerging side, is come to headquarters for a couple of weeks, go hang out at a corporate store for a couple of weeks, and then we'll send somebody to your place when you're ready to open your doors
Hmm.
for a couple of weeks. And and that's great, but it to me it's not sustainable, right? Having a place where you can go, and even if it's not an LMS, because you can have video libraries, PDF libraries, other things like that. And LMS is nice, and well, we make an LMS, so we believe in LMSs. But it's nice from a tracking standpoint and certification standpoint. But I think the key there is having the materials and having the materials available to folks in an easy, consumable way.
Hmm.
You
Yep.
know, so that's pretty
Correct.
cool. And then do you see those programs kind of morphing as you go from that emerging guy with a half a dozen locations, and maybe they got a bunch of training videos in a library somewhere, and then kind of somebody gets like these. Did you see programs evolving over time? Like, because you said you got some guys that are established franchises, and but maybe they're regionally focused or they're regionally strong in the Northeast and they want to open up a bunch of locations in the Southwest,
Hmm.
but they already got, 200 locations, right? They bring you guys in and go, hey, we want to go into the North, the Southwest now. And you're like, okay. And they've got all their ducks in a row and they check all your boxes and they've got all those, do you see differences in training programs there in terms of how they evolve or not so much?
I absolutely do. One thing to think about for these franchisors that are emerging is I have a lot of conversations with them that they're not really focused on the future, which is fine because at that point in their franchisor life cycle, they're focused on obtaining new franchisees, getting them open and successful from just a standard expectation.
Hmm.
Where a franchisee gets really upset is when they're at year 4, 5, 6. and they're not
Mhm.
feeling like there's a justified return on support for what they're paying out within the royalties.
Right.
So, as it relates to training and success specifically, the two things that I really love seeing with an established franchisor that's a good indicator that they're future proofing their franchisee success is having an FAC, a franchise advisory committee in place of the
Mhm.
top or average performing franchisees within their system that are giving them feedback on here's what needs to fix based off of where we are within our life.
Okay.
And then the second step of that, and this is another pitfall that franchisors run into quite a bit, is don't fall out of touch with what it looks like within operating today and now. So, for example, I see some franchisors sell off their corporate locations when they hit a certain milestone. And again, that's fine. It's very dependent on what that franchisor is looking to accomplish.
Uh-huh.
But I'm fond of holding on to that because that means as world breaking situations occur like COVID, then that franchisor is in the weeds figuring it out real time to then disseminate that experience and information to their franchisees. So taking that, applying it to, there's a lot of different names for this, but like an FBC, a franchise business consultant that is
Right.
regionally focused on the success of their franchise partners, that's spending physical time with them in their location to not only monitor and maintain and the expectations for success, but then also to implement new systems that are maybe not being implemented because the franchisee doesn't have any accountability to implement those systems.
So let's take, those are interesting. So if we look at the FAC, the advisory council, what point in the development of a franchisor do you usually see that emerge? Is it 10 units, 100 units, 1,000, like you got to have some franchisor ease out there first in order to have it before you can have a council, right? So it's not happening at, I've got 5 corporate locations and one, or I should say, actually, strike that back. I would imagine at the emerging level, it's much more informal because the franchisor, and especially the founder, knows all the franchisees intimately,
Hmm.
right? And so there's no formal board because, they're in there and they know them all. But it seems like it's at a certain point, it gets so, you want to formalize that. And is that, would you say like at the 50 unit level, the 100 unit level? Like,
So this
or,
is another one of those, I'd say, answers that it kind of depends on the person you're talking to and the franchisor. Just
uh
like you said, though, in the beginning, I mean, you should fully intend on taking the feedback of your franchisees, but it
right.
is more of an informal relationship. Your first 15, 20 franchisees buy into a model based off of the story of the founder and the model, not so much because of the widget. But I think personally, when you hit that 10, 15 franchisee milestone,
uh
that's where you're starting to find your 5, 10% of performers that you really need to have a consistent meeting with them, whether that's on a quarterly basis or twice a year, whatever it may be, to start to get those nuggets of information and feedback from them. Again, in a very formal setting with
Yeah.
clearly set conversation topics.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Like I imagine it, or at the very beginning, it's very informal.
Hmm.
And then at some point, it's like I could see two things happening. One, as the founder or CEO of that franchisor, you get so focused on opening up new stores and other things, I mean, all these things that are smacking you in the face and sucking up your time that, I wouldn't be surprised if you wake up one day and it's been 2 years since you've gone to, uh, you know, one of your top performing or your
Hmm.
top performing guys and, said, "Hey, how's it going? What can we do better?" Right. So that's interesting. That'd be earlier than I thought. And once you got a dozen or so, you want to start to formalize the process
Hmm.
so that you don't get that gap and where you get distracted.
Yeah. And the reason why I say that personally, I mean, as you get new personalities, you expand into different regions, et cetera, of course your business model is going to change. And especially as
Mhm.
you're pivoting based off of what the world's thrown at you within that moment. But kind of like I said, where culture is not, an intuitive thing, like it's made, you have to be very
Right.
intentional about it. The systems that you start to build and put in stone today are the ones that are going to help make sure that it's future proofed. And so again, just leaning on your resources, getting the feedback of your franchisees in the beginning, those first 10, 15, they're going to make or break your model. And so it's so
Uh-huh.
important to depend on them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense. If you go back to what you said earlier, I mean, those are the references that the next 50 are going to
Exactly.
use. Right. And then rinse and repeat. Those 50 are going to be the next references that the next 100 use, and it's interesting. So so the one thing was get that council or that formal feedback mechanism in place early. And then I like your other one too. It's really interesting because the couple of practice. I was a lifelong consultant before. I was in consulting before I did the LMS thing, and even now, and I practice something similar to that. We always believed in back my old firm, working manager,
Mm,
right? It's like you want to, and I had one partner in one of my practices. He always was he came from the technical side, and he always reserved a handful of technical tasks for him, even though he was a practice manager, right? Because he always wanted to keep his hands dirty, so he knew so he would have that intuitive sense of what's going on, with the technology, with the clients and all that. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I practice the same thing in Latitude, where I'll get my hands dirty in a sale and take a lead or take an, it's like, and then a lot of people will be like, "Oh, you're the CEO." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What are you doing this?" I'm like, "Well, funny you ask. I'd like to actually know what the hell's going on." Well, it's that primary, and I think of it as primary market research, right? Like, I don't need to be doing that, trying to close that deal or take that lead or that, but I'm getting primary market research. And so I like what you're saying in terms of, as the franchisors grow, is, you keep a couple of those units to yourself as corporate owned, and that's your primary market research as to what's going on in the space, right? Because, like you said, something like COVID happens, or even, a regional thing, or
mhm.
changing tastes if you're in a restaurant business, or anything actually, changing tastes or changing physical tastes or fashion tastes, or just how you interact with folks. It's interesting. It's really cool. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I
Yeah.
started smiling because I don't know why I remember this and it stood out so much, but when I mentioned that there were those 12 stores I was responsible for, I mean, they weren't 12 stores in Dallas, Fort Worth. It was truly Gillette, Wyoming, Reno, Nevada, Redding, California, Eugene and Corvallis, Oregon. I mean, they were all over the place. And I remember we were sitting down with all of our area managers at the time, and I did just that without realizing it. Whenever I was
Yeah.
in the location, I usually took about 10 or 15% of the tickets just so that way I could make sure the items per transaction, average ticket, the actual, information we need to gather for the sales process was being done. And at that time, I almost got scolded for it. And now I
Yeah.
see, in retrospect, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, it's one of those catch-22 things, right? It's like, no, your time is much more valuable. Like, as you go up in your career, right, and you have a larger domain of responsibility.
Hmm.
Like, your time becomes exceedingly valuable to do these things that have tremendous value to the organization. And, what are you doing? Getting your hands dirty, flipping a burger, or,
Sure.
buttoning this down, or coding that, or that. And it wasn't until I thought of it as primary market research that, because it bugged me, because it was like, I'm doing this from a gut level. But it's like, yeah, it makes no sense. Managing a $20 million practice. What am I doing? Picking up this task on this little project for this one client, right? But then once I started thinking of it as primary market research, it's like, oh, okay, that's that. I'm not doing it so that I can do this one little, take that ticket,
Hmm.
right? I'm doing this because I'm getting primary market research on, is the process working? Are there any hiccups? Where might we want to improve it? What's the customer feedback? Is this working for the franchisees? And then it kind of changes. So I really like those two things: the advisory council, and keeping some corporate stores. And I would add that back into what you're saying before, when you're evaluating a franchisor as a franchisee, is like, look, if they're growing and they're keeping their stores, and they have this advisory council, which you may never be on, but the fact that there's this formal mechanism for getting feedback from the franchisees back to corporate, it's not
Absolutely.
just informal. I think that's really important.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that was really interesting. Is there?
I'm happy you think so.
Yeah. Well, the listeners get bored because I say this most episodes, but I learned something, so that's good. I just love learning stuff. That was really fascinating. Before we sign off, it is a training podcast and a learning podcast. So I like to ask folks, like, so outside of work, what do you like to learn about?
Man,
Uh,
I'm a
uh,
young guy. So I would say honestly, it's a problem if I'm not consuming information focused on bettering myself in the workspace. This is I'm in that grind period of my life, but to actually give you a solid answer,
It doesn't have to be professionally oriented. Like earlier this year, my girls said they were going to do a half Ironman.
yeah.
I got two daughters, and they're marathon runners. And I said, "Hey, Dad, this year instead of marathon, we're going to go do this Ironman thing." And I was like, "Hey, can I join you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So the first time I did a half marathon in my life was the third leg of a half Ironman. So so I learned a lot. Learned a
Yeah.
lot about myself.
Was that so that was the 70.1. So you
Yeah,
did the
this
run and they handled
the
yeah.
yeah, I did the 70.3. Now my girls finished like an hour and a half ahead of me because, they might be a little younger than me and they might be a lot faster than I am.
I'll say
Right.
fitness is definitely still a big piece of my life. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the huge come up that High Rocks has been having in the States. I think it originated over in the UK or something like that, but
No,
around the
no. What
time
is it again?
so it's called High Rocks.
Okay. What is that?
It's it's basically it's an interesting like kind of hybrid combination of CrossFit and then also a lot of cardio based activities.
Oh,
They organize these giant races, like thousands of people are participating simultaneously. But it is funny if you start researching it. Just like when CrossFit started becoming a thing, the
yeah.
powerlifters made fun of the CrossFitters made fun of the long distance runners, and it was this ever ending cycle. And it's kind of happening with High Rocks a little bit now too. But it's you've got burpee broad jumps, sled pulls, wall balls, sled pushes. You've got the ski erg, and then you've also got rows. And you have to do that for time and distance. And then in between each one of those segments, you also have several meters worth of running that you have to do. And so it's this interesting combination of, you've got your endurance based athletes, but then you've also got your strength based athletes, and it's meshed into one. And nothing has kicked my ass as much as these darn High Rocks workouts. I tell you what, but it's been
Uh,
good.
Is that HI rocks or when you say high rocks,
HYROX.
HYROX, high rocks? That's it. That's interesting. My cousin, a number of years ago, he started the Civilian Military Combine, which was
Mm,
it was over in New York and the Northeast, but it was kind of a CrossFit thing, but similar type of concept of what you're saying. Like they took the military fitness training, the burpees and the mud swim or the mud
mhm,
crawl and all these different things, and they laid them out in I think it was a 10K course.
mm.
And so but you did the combine first, and then you went out on the running course, and the running course though had the sled pulls and some obstacle, little obstacle course type of thing. And man, that that was rough.
It's a little brutal.
I, I was running back then, and I did that. It was like, yeah, no, scaling walls.
Yeah.
It's like you get in your rhythm, and then all of a sudden, like boom, you're changing your muscle group. It's crazy.
Well, and I, I
Yeah,
I know I keep saying I'm a young guy, but I am starting to get to that period to where I'm not the youngest one out there anymore. And so
yeah.
these kids in college are just smoking me on these runs, and it's definitely very starting to feel it. I'm starting to feel the pain a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's hey, keep it up. Yeah, it's a great thing, and I'm gonna have to check that out because that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is a lot of
You know,
fun. Yeah. Good
and
community based workout too.
yeah. I find that with all the endurance stuff, whether it's the CrossFit or the running or the biking, the community is just fantastic.
Hmm.
Like bunch of like great people, just really
Yeah.
good people.
Yep.
So,
And
all right, so
everyone,
you are learning how to become an expert high rocks athlete.
I'm trying my best. Yeah. We'll
So
see how it shakes out.
there you go.
Besides that, I really enjoy doing autocross. So if you ever make it out into Boise, you can ride along with me.
Oh, okay. Mental note there. That that's a that's something I've never done. That'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
ton of
So,
fun.
and so if I ever get out there, that'd be really good. So I appreciate the offer. Um, anything else you want to cover while we're chatting?
No,
Patrick?
this has been a lot of fun, and I feel like I was doing a lot of the talking, so I apologize.
No, 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 no. Hey, I can't be learning if I'm talking.
Well, that's how I feel as well. So, no, I appreciate you having me on. This was a ton of fun. So hopefully we can connect again in the future.
I'd like that. That'd be great. and I have an open invitation to go to Boise, so that's good.
Yep, that's right.
I hear it's a beautiful city. All right, so we're wrapped up. Patrick, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed it. It was great talking to you. You're a fun guy to talk to. Franchise Fastlane, it sounds like they're doing really cool things and bringing those franchisees and franchisors together and looking for that good fit. And I got a lot out of this because, again, we're as a firm, we're focused more on the training and helping franchisors put those training programs out there and all that type of stuff. That's what we do for a living. Um, but it's got to serve a higher purpose, and the higher purpose, I think, is what you've been laying out, is what makes for a good franchisor, and what makes for a good franchisor fit.
Mm-hmm.
And then the training, like every other process out there, is supports that basic thing, right?
Correct.
So it was educational for me. This is my primary market research as well, that I get to take back to my day job of being a software company and see how we're going to help our clients train their franchisees. And so I appreciate all those insights, really do. So thank you for your time and your insights. I really appreciate it. And for everybody out there, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate your support. Have a great day.